And so with that, I begin the first lecture of this series of 13, called The Last Years of the Old Order, Israel and the Jews, 1962 to 66. First lecture is called Big Enough for Both, Triumphant Jewish Nationalism and Triumphant Arab Nationalism Cohabit the Middle East in the years 62-66. Ordinarily, I would make some kind of joke about spending all this time on a few years, but the Middle East situation is not anything to laugh about. So I'll get right into my remarks. Let me start first and put some time and help us understand what I mean by Arab nationalism. Now, let me start off by saying like this. It doesn't exist anymore. Arab nationalism was a 20th century episode, which lasted from around 1900 to 2000. It's gone, okay? This was created by Arab nationalism, but perhaps you're aware that this system of states and borders is exactly what the fighting is going on about in the Middle East as we speak. So I'm going to be talking about the past in the 1960s, which even though it seems to me and some of you like yesterday, what isn't. And at that time, different dynamics were running around. To understand what I'm talking about is a little bit of a story of maps. So let me start by saying, let's go back 1,500 years to the next map. This was once an Arab empire. I spoke about this a little bit last time, but I'm not going to rely on anybody's memory. I'll say it again. What are they laughing at? He said, I'm in the teaching business. Anyway, I'll repeat what I just said. This was an empire conquered and run by Arabs. Not only Muslims, Arabs. Okay? They busted out of Saudi Arabia. This is the Umayyad Empire. And it's pretty darn big, as you know. Now, wait a second. Subsequently, the Arabs lost it. It continued to be a Muslim thing, but they were conquered by other Muslims. You get it? The Arabs were a subject race within their empire. So let's go to the next map. Skipping over, but here's the Ottoman Empire, which is a powerful empire. It's actually bigger in some respects than the Arabs once. Look how much the Turks conquered in Europe, a third of Europe, up to Budapest and beyond. Okay? People forget that. Now you know, if you know this map, you know why Croatia and Hungary and Poland are saying, we don't want anybody. That we've been there and done that. As opposed to Germany and France never experienced that. That's why they're acting so stupid. They have any memory, right? But the ones who've been there and had great-great-great-grandparents where they heard from the great-great-great-great-grandparents how the Tatars and the Turks used to come and pillage and burn and rape and loot and destroy and all the rest of it, and it's carried on, as so to speak, with the mother's milk. When they hear now that a zillion refugees want to come in there, they say, we don't want to do it. So my point, though, is here's Arab countries, here's Egypt, North Africa, Iraq, and all that, but the Arabs are a conquered race. They're not part of the ruling powers at all. As a matter of fact, this used to be Arab, and then we know exactly what happened. Let's go to the next one. Two guys in the 1500s, this guy, Selim, and his son, Suleiman the Magnificent, conquered the Middle East. Selim, in other words, they had Turkey, like Erdogan today, and then Selim, in the 1510s, conquered Syria, Israel, Egypt, all that area, Lebanon, and Suleiman, after a whole bunch of wars, conquered Iraq. So the Turks were the bosses. The Arabs were one of the races. Again, it's the same religion, that's true, but they were not the powers. And by the way, they hate each other. The Arabs didn't like being under the Turks. They hated that, but they couldn't do anything about it. Now, interestingly, and I made an article about this recently, this was occurring at the same time that the Iranians were putting together their empire. Okay? And so Suleiman and Selim lived at the same time as these two guys, who were the founders of the famous Safavid Iranian Empire, and that's where you had all these battles over here. Take a look at the next map. Here's the Turkish Empire, here's the Persian one. See how they're fighting all the time? And the battles were always over who controls this area, Iraq, and the coast of what we call today the Gulf states. Same thing is happening today, right? And in order to sharpen the differences, the Safavids turned Persia, which used to be a Sunni state, into a Shiite one. These are the Henry VIII of Persia. I'll say it again. In the 1500s and the 1600s, the Shahs, the rulers of Persia, forced the Shiite religion down the throats of unwilling Persians, and they killed and tortured and maimed just like the Henry VIII did and all that, the rest of it, and burned people. And by the time you get to the grandchildren, they were fervent Shiites, and they are till today. This only happened relatively recently. Okay? So such is the map of the Middle East. Now, I want you to notice one thing in looking at all this. Where are the Arabs? Right? They're not there. Okay? Do they even exist? Well, the people. Now I want you to be very focused on what I'm about to say, because this is the basis of everything tonight. Here is Arabia. Okay, the people living in Arabia are Arabs. That's what they are. That's why they call them Arabia. There are a certain group of people, a certain ethnic group, tribes, if you wish, who way back when were Arab, even before Muhammad. Okay? But what about the people of Iraq? What about the people of Syria? What about the people of Egypt and so forth? Are they Arabs? Do their ancestors come from Arabia? No. The Egyptians, for example, with the pharaohs and stuff like that, right? Way back when, before the Arabs even existed. The Egyptians come from Egypt, from Egyptians. The Syrians, similar. The Iraqis, as we call them, the Mesopotamians, the Babylonians, and so forth and so on, they don't come from Arabia. They're not Arabs. You get what I'm saying? They're not ethnically Arabs. They're their own thing. Okay? They're only Arab in the sense of language. Only in the sense of language. What does an Egyptian have in common with a guy from Saudi Arabia? Okay? Now, in terms of ethnicity. Now, religion, they have the same. But guess what? France and Spain have the same religion. They fought a lot of wars. Germany and France, for example, have the same religion, fought a lot of wars. You can be the same religion, and that doesn't mean you're the same. So what do they have in common? What makes an Arab? I'm de-emphasizing the Muslim part. I'm trying to call attention to the Arab part. What makes an Egyptian, for example, or a Lebanese, or a Kurd? What makes them Arab? Only in the sense of language. Other than that, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Jews, who, by the way, didn't speak Arabic, etc., they don't feel kinship or a common bond. The Christians and the Druze and the Muslims who live in Syria and in Lebanon for century after century, they don't say we're all part of one chevra. Quite the contrary. The Christians stick with the Christian area, hate the Muslims, and vice versa. The Druze kill both of them. They kill the Druze. It's the way business is done in the Middle East. They actually hate each other, and they all hate the Turkish conqueror. So they speak the same language for a variety of reasons, but they're not. They don't say, Achenu b'nei Syria, or something like that, right? No, I mean in the old days, because Christians stay in the Christian quarter, and Muslims stay in the Muslim quarter, and so on and so forth. This is true in Iraq. This is true in Egypt, where you have the Coptics and all this. This is true in all these different countries, okay? In Palestine, by the way, there used to be Christian areas like Nazareth and Muslim areas and things like that. And if you say, are you all Syrians or Palestinians? That's not the language that they would use. They would say, I'm a Christian who lives in the Lebanese mountains or something like that. I'm a Christian who lives in northern Syria. I'm a Muslim who lives in central Mesopotamia, central Iraq. That's how they thought of themselves. And again, they were all part of one color because they're conquered by the same group, by the Ottoman Turks. But they don't nobody likes being conquered, right? And Turks don't speak Arabic, Turks speak Turkish. So, even on the religious end, thanks to the Safavid Empire, which is the 15th, 16th, 1700s, now even the Muslims hate each other because this is the Sunni and this is the Shia, as we all know. Right? That's what's going on. By the way, have you heard of a country called Afghanistan? Have you heard of a country called Pakistan? What's the shot with that? When the Shahs of Persia rammed down the Shiite religion down the throats of their Persian subjects, they were able to get away with it. But there were some areas where were more mountainous, where the inhabitants and the tribes were so opposed to becoming Apikursim, as they saw it, and changing their long-standing Sunni Islam for this newfangled thing called Shiite Islam, that they broke away from the Persian domination and were able to assert their religious and therefore their political independence, and that's called Afghanistan. And that's called Pakistan. So even though they're to the east of Persia, as we all know the map, they're there. That's why when you hear about the Taliban and all this kind of stuff, if you remember, Iran actually cooperated with America. Iran didn't want the Taliban and groups like that to get too big, because to them, they're like an enemy. I'll say it again. Afghanistan and Iranians are historic enemies because the Afghanis look at the Iranians as heretical conquerors who would like to do, and believe you me, if Iran gets an A-bomb, one of the groups that's going to feel it, one of the groups is going to be Afghanistan. Another group is going to feel it eventually, not in the short term, but in the long term, Pakistan. especially the part called Baluchistan, Eastern, they got big plans. And this all goes back a long way. Is language. The fact that all the groups I spoke about in Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Arabia, Yemen, and so forth, and North Africa when you get to Libya and Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco, is the fact that they all speak the same language. Is that enough to constitute the basis for a single national identity? This is an interesting question. Would you consider the United States and New Zealand and South Africa and the UK and Jamaica to have the same nationality, even though we all speak English? It's a fair question. Of course, the whole shot of nationalism is a myth. It is an imagined reality, as the scholars call it. In other words, nationalism, nationality, people have a nationality, it doesn't actually exist in a physical sense. It's an ideational sort of thing. If everybody in this room feels that they're part of a Jewish nation, then they are, simply because it becomes a subjective reality due to everybody's voluntary, subjective feeling of a certain way. Subjective realities do work. After all, we Jews have been around for thousands of years. As I say many times, we've not had a state. We've not had a church. We haven't had anything that could physically or organizationally bind us. What's to bind formally Jews from Sephardim and Ashkelon, for example, off the top of the bat? Or for that matter, Jews from St. Louis and Baltimore? The answer is, if they subjectively feel themselves to be part of a group and related to the other one, if we feel ourselves to be brothers and sisters, that is a powerful reality of its own, but it's entirely a subjective one. Because you're not my brother, we don't have the same mother. You understand? But if we feel that we're part of a group, so I'm trying to show you that emotions and feelings are tidal waves in history. They're very important. Now, nationalism itself is a European intellectual phenomenon associated primarily with the 19th century, with the 1800s. You never heard about this beforehand. The nation is what they call a hypostatic reality. The nation doesn't actually exist. It's the shot with a nation is that the nation is more than the sum of its citizens. Because if you want to be very scientific and prosaic, Italy is just a bunch of people, X number of people live in Italy. Spain is just X number of people live in Spain. That's what Spain is. No. We don't deny the reality that there are so and so many millions of people living in Spain or Germany or wherever, but there's something more. When they come together, they're more than the sum of their parts. Here are the famous theoreticians, the German Fichte and the Italian Mazzini, Giuseppe Mazzini. These are the two people in the wake of the Napoleonic Wars and afterwards who start to articulate there's such a thing called the German nation, German folk. After all, Germany, perhaps you remember, was a bunch of little small states. And, Prussia and Bavaria and Saxony, they're all different countries. They fought with each other all the time. Yes, they had a common language, but are they part of a single state? No, I'm a Prussian, I'm a Bavarian or something like that. And yet, in spite of what I said, after, and not until, but after the Napoleonic Wars, during the Napoleonic Wars actually, people started to step forth and say, no, all Germans, regardless of the region you live in, are part of a single Zach called Germany. And they all felt it. And when they felt it, they got a tremendous koyach. Okay? So Bismarck, for example, is famous for taking this, and this is not even all of them, but this is a bunch of the different small, look how many little colors. These are all different German states, and turning it into this. Okay? Called the German Empire, which was a federal state. In other words, yes, there still is a kingdom of Bavaria under Bismarck and the Kaiser. Yes, there was a Grand Duchy of Baden and all that. But and that was like being part of Maryland or New York or Pennsylvania. But they all felt German Reich, the German Empire, as they called it. Okay? So Bismarck took or rode the horse of nationalist feelings, and he turned it into a military and political reality. Of course, a lot of trouble happened as a result of that. But I'm trying to show you that nationalism, even though you could argue, as I just did, it's a fake, it's reality, all kind of worked. At least in Europe, it kind of worked. Same thing with Italy. This guy was the Italian Bismarck, Count Cavour, who was a friend of the Jews, by the way. And look, Italy used to be this for many centuries. Here's one kingdom, here's another, the Papal States, here's a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. That's the duchies of Parma, Piacenza, Modena. These are tiny little medinas. You understand? Anybody familiar with the Charter House of Parma? There's little things like that. And then, what do you call it? All the rest of it. And he turned it into this, one country. Okay? Now, he did it by conquest, but nevertheless, he did it. He turned it into a single country. And the people went along. Now, again, you could say, the fact that people in Venice speak the same language more or less as the people in Naples does not necessarily mean that they're from the same nation. As a matter of fact, I've been in Venice. Venetians are very turned off. If you say you're from the same country as the Neapolitans, they say, no, we're not. I mean, I know, yeah, but really, they're not. They have their own very strong local identity because Venice was a powerful empire and nation of itself for many, many centuries. And the same thing with other parts of Italy. In spite of what I just said, the nationalist feeling caused this to happen. Okay, that takes care of Europe. Now, what about the Ottoman Empire, which, of course, ruled the Arabs? Nationalism hits the Ottoman Empire in the late 1800s, not in the early and middle 1800s, a little bit later. So take a look at these maps. Turkey started out like this, ended up like this, and ended up like this. Now what happened? They lost all of Europe. When they were powerful, look, they had a third of Europe. I'll tell you again, this takes you up to Bratislava and Pressburg and the borders of Austria. I mean, it's big. They were close to Vienna and all this. By the time you get to the late 1800s, they lost this. They're down to this. Okay? Much less after the Russo-Turkish War of 1877. And then, by the time you get to 1914, they're down to nothing, to this, is what they have today. So they lost all of this, all of Europe, and they ended up with a tiny piece. And believe you me, if you know the little nitty-gritty details, if the Balkan nations had fought with each own themselves, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, tooth and nail, and shechted each other, they could easily knock out this part of Turkey and make sure that the Turks don't even have Istanbul. It's their own fault. The history of the success of Islam in Europe is a history of the machlokes between the Christians. That's all it is. It's purely that. So anyway, these feelings of nationalism. Now, what do I mean when I say feelings of nationalism hit the Ottoman Empire? The Ottoman rulers were the conquerors. They're the Turkish group. There wasn't a war with nationalism. They're the ones who conquered back from the Middle Ages. But the Asiatic subject peoples of the Ottoman Empire started to notice what the peoples of the Balkans had done and started to dream for themselves. So that, let's go back one. If they get rid of this, and they certainly get rid of this, and they're down to this, who is left in the Turkish Empire? This. The people in Asia, in the Middle East. Not the Europeans. The Europeans are gone. Europeans have their own countries. So the people of the Turkish Empire, around the time of Theodor Herzl, is basically left with the peoples over here. And the peoples over here start to say, why can't we do what they did over here? If the Europeans could kick the Turks out and set up their own, why can't we do that? Or at least some people in the Arab countries. Now, I'm falling for the same trick, but I'm saying some people from the Arab-speaking areas said that. Okay? They started to dream for themselves. After all, let's go to the next map. Here's a ethnic map. By no means are the Turks. This, where I'm pointing right over here, as you can see, these are the Turks. That's it. Over here, there's nothing Turkish. It's all Arabs, and you got your Greeks. And look how much of a part of Turkey was Greek. Okay. Look, the Kurds are obviously doing their own thing. The Kurds still want to have it over there, and so on and so on and so forth. So I'm simply trying to show you that the Turks are by no means all over the place in the Turkish Empire. They were one small group. They're a powerful group, but they're one small group. Now, this doesn't exist anymore. After a bunch of wars, after the First World War, they all shechted each other, and then they made a deal, which is the origin of the transfer idea. They call it the transfer treaty. When you hear people in Israel talk about transfer, they're modeling it on the 1922 deal when the Turks said, we'll send all the Christians here, and then all the Muslims come here. And that's what happened. So when you hear Israeli politicians on the right wing say, let's transfer the Arabs out, well, they don't even know. They're using the old language, which once upon a time was an internationally agreed upon sort of thing. Okay? Now, so what happens with these groups over here? Well, in the Turkish Empire, as you can see over here, among the different groups, is religious difference. Some are Christians and some are Muslims. fact, they're all over the place. Christian Muslims are living in communities side by side, hating each other side by side for a long time. The Turks know how to divide and conquer. For the Jews, in many of the provinces, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they don't have it bad. The Beni Ishchai you've all heard of is because he lives in Baghdad, and Baghdad is in Iraq, and in Baghdad, Iraq, all the different groups are at each other's throats. So the Jews aren't looking to set up an independent state in Iraq. And so the Jews in Baghdad had it good under the Turks. So you could have somebody with the old Beni Ishchai phenomenon where you could have a large, flourishing Jewish community in Baghdad with dozens and dozens of shuls and about 20 or 30 yeshivas and things that once people don't know. It was like 100,000 Jews in Baghdad. It was an amazing place. You could have because it was under the Turks. And therefore it's cosmopolitan because the Turks aren't Arabs. The Arabs are a group that don't like it. But what are the Arabs? There's no such thing as Arabs. You got your Christians, you got your Muslims. As you know now from the news, you got your Yazidis, you got Zoroastrians, you got all kind of groups over there. And one of them is the Jews. That's all. One of them is the Jews. They all speak Arabic, but they all hate each other. Here's a famous scene in 1860. There was big riots broke out in Lebanon. Who? Everybody against everybody. The Druze, the Christians, and the Muslims all kill each other. So look at this. If you look very closely, here's a bunch of Muslims stabbing a bunch of Christians. Here's some Christians shooting the Muslims. The Druze are at the top shooting down. It's Tuesday in Beirut. You understand? And as a matter of fact, there's a big slaughter went on, and the Europeans, the British and the French, particularly the French, landed an army there in 1860. And first of all, to protect the Christians from being massacred, but they didn't protect the Muslims from being massacred by the Christians. They did to kind of restore a certain law and order. I might say, there's a famous episode in Anglo-Jewish history that a lot of Christians were killed in these riots. They also killed a lot of Muslims. So in England, they put in the paper they're having a big tzedakah fund for the Christian victims of the riots and killings in Lebanon. The first guy to send £100, that's a lot of money, sent £100, was Montefiore. Okay? And that was a smart move. 22 years later, when the pogroms broke out in Russia, the Archbishop of Canterbury said like this: he sent money to my thing, I'm sending money to his thing. Understand? And he spoke at the famous rally protesting that. So these are all well-known episodes. So the Middle East has a history. Some Arabic-speaking intellectuals, Arab-speaking intellectuals, I didn't say they're Arabs because I'm trying to show there's no such thing as Arabs except in Arabia, influenced by European nationalisms and their success in overthrowing the Turks, start to articulate a new abstract theory which they wish to transform into a subjective reality. And the name of this theory is Arab nationalism. Never existed before. And the idea over there is that all Arabic-speaking peoples constitute a single nation. Okay? I may live in Syria, you may live in Iraq, this one may live in Morocco. We're all part of one big United States, Arabs. So Arab equals Italian. Arab equals German. Or something. No, it's a nation, a nationality. This was a new idea. As I said before, throughout history, Arabs means they come from Arabia. And the other people are conquered people by the Arabs, going back to the empires, all the maps I showed you before. And they wouldn't consider themselves fellow citizens of some entity that has never existed. Okay? The argument of these intellectuals who were westernized, these are guys who either went to university in Europe or read a lot of books and newspapers from Europe and liked those ideas. And remember, in the year 1900 or so, Europe was so far advanced technologically, so far ahead of the Arabs, it made them look like sand jockeys and things like all these kind of terms. And they said, we want to catch up with Europe. And so the result is that they made the argument the religious differences are nowhere near as important as the national commonalities. That's a European type of thought. Yes, there are Jews, Christians, and Protestants and Catholics in England, but they're all British. Yes, there are Catholics, Protestants, and Jews in Germany. They're all German or France. In other words, the secular national identity is the dominant one. And the religion is far less important. And basically, I'm American, you're American. I go to synagogue, you go to the church. What's the difference? That's not important. I mean, I'm not knocking it, but that's not what we have in common. That's not interesting. We both like the Orioles. We vote Republican. We vote Democrat. We like this. We're Americans. If America's attacked, we're pro-America. This is what's important. This whole way of thinking, a secular nationalism, is something that starts to be advocated and created, because it never happened before. And what they're really trying to do is invent something. Of course, they got to get traction, but invent something. Now, they're going to say I'm a liar. They say, what are you talking about? No, this has always been that way. But that's a lie. Just look at the map and you see it never happened before. So it's baloney. And the reason I say it's baloney, I'm being polite, is because throughout history, they've all been at each other's throats. As they are at the moment that I'm speaking right now, in the year 2015. They're at each other's throats. Just go in line. You see them shechting each other. And when I say shechting each other, unfortunately, I'm speaking literally. Right? Maybe Malika might be a better word, but nevertheless, it's happening as we speak. And the differences are along religious and ethnic lines. Okay? So, but nevertheless, don't go to 2015, go to 1915, go to 1900. And the main proponents of this kind of thinking, obviously, would be Christians, Arabs, Christians who speak Arabic, in Syria, in Palestine, in Egypt, and places like that, and secular Muslims, of which there weren't too many. Right? And secular Muslim would be a guy, as I said before, went to college, or went to Europe, or something like this, and have, are dressed Western, and are thinking past the old, and they look at the old Islam as something backwards. And so that's where they're coming over here. Now, what do they want? What do they want? They say like this: there should be an Arab state. Hold on. Turkey rules all that stuff. Well, we want to overthrow the Turks. What do we mean specifically? Let the Turks go back to Turkey, as you and I call today that area. Let's go back to Turkey. And the area of Egypt and Syria and Palestine and Iraq and whatever, we should, get out of here and let us rule ourselves. What do you have in common? Well, we're all same country. It's all same country. All speak same language. It's all same country. The Turks weren't having any of that, and as long as they were in power, they hanged all the they hanged all the Arab nationalists they could get their hands on. This is in Jerusalem, by the way. Okay, used to have. I'm going to give people the wrong idea. They used to have big gallows right in front of Shar Yafo. Okay, now anyhow, the Arab nationalists dream of Turkey disappearing and replacing with an Arab state, or at least Turkey getting the heck out of the Middle East. And then, in the middle of all these theorizing, World War I pops up, and to everybody's surprise, history becomes at an accelerated tempo, and Turkey disintegrates. As you know, Turkey was one of the countries that fought with the Germans and lost World War I. As a result, the Allies carved Turkey up. In fact, it was up to them. There wouldn't even be a Turkey, but the Turks were able to hold on to that. So who gets the pieces? Now, the Arab nationalists were around. They went to Versailles and places like that, the treaty, and they want a big state or two based on their notion of a common Arabness. I'm going to show you a map in a second, put together by Americans. The United States government under Woodrow Wilson sent two Christians, King and Crane. One of them was like a missionary, and the other guy was the president of a college. And they went over to the Middle East. They were Protestants. They certainly didn't like Jews. They certainly didn't like Zionism. And they mainly listened to the Arab nationalist types. And they said, this is what should we look at? There should be one big country called Syria. Look what it contains. And one big country called Mesopotamia. Right? These are American recommendations for a post-Ottoman Middle East. And this was the official position of the United States government. Now, the Jewish lobbyists got it knocked out. Brandeis was very close to Woodrow Wilson, and so even though this commission put up there in the State Department did, it was like buried. That's what happened. But if you're an Arab, look what I just said. Here they got a fair idea of what the Arabs wanted, an Arab nationalism, and the Jews, through backdoor shtick, nefariously, insidiously, because Brandeis was a Supreme Court judge, got it shelved. You understand? This is all part. Now, what I'm trying to say is this. Here you are, a nice Jewish audience in Baltimore. Believe me, in Cairo and Damascus and places, they all know. They learned this in school. This is what they learned in junior high and high school. The basic Arab history. How we've been shafted and screwed by everybody down in Asia, particularly the Jews, in the last 100 and some years. And here's an example of it. The American government itself, on a objective basis, were willing to do this, and then it got dumped. because they certainly didn't get this map. What they got was this. Palestine Mandate. Syria was broken up into a little piece of the big Syria that I showed you before, and given to France. Iraq was broken up from the big Mesopotamia and given to England. And Palestine is even worse from the Arab nationalist point of view. Was given to the British in order to implement the Balfour Declaration. That is the language of the Versailles Treaty, or to be more exact, the San Remo Treaty. That is the language of international law. I want you to understand. I made this point before, but I can't emphasize it enough. In international law, in 1920, all the nations of the world signed on to say that we're dividing the Middle East this way, and Palestine is being given as a mandate in order to implement the Balfour Declaration, and the language of the Balfour Declaration is part of the San Remo Treaty. And by the way, it also says that the World Zionist Organization will represent the Jewish people. And there's an unbelievable achievement as far as international law is concerned. So the United Nations, let's put it that way, the League of Nations, they said that this is the whole Palestine, and by the way, this is the original Palestine, including Jordan, is there for the Jews to settle instead of a Jewish state, provided, of course, in the language of the Balfour Declaration, nothing is done to hurt the interests of the Palestinian Arabs. Now, I realize there's a contradiction, but nevertheless, that's the language that they put into there. So this was a big bone in the throat, to put it mildly. By breaking the Middle East into individual states, what the Europeans did was to permanently divide Arabness into artificial competing units. And to them, this was a big plot against Arab nationalism. The elites of Syria, Jordan, Iraq are not going to surrender their power to any other body. Do you understand what I just said? This is the heart of ISIS today, heart of Al-Qaeda. By setting up a country called Iraq, and they made a country called Iraq with a King Faisal and a parliament and an army and a bureaucracy and all that junk. And another place they eventually set up was a thing called Syria, along similar lines. And eventually another thing they eventually set up, many years later, was a thing called Lebanon, along similar lines, and so on and so forth. Eventually, as we Jews know, not even eventually, right in 1922, they cut off half of this and gave it to a country called Jordan. By doing that, they created an entire group of people who benefit from a fractured status quo in which the Arab world is not united. And by definition, they're going to hold on to their chelek come hell or high water. They're going to fight that there shouldn't be one giant Arab state, but Iraq should be Iraq, right? And Syria should be Syria, and so on and so forth. So if you're an Arab nationalist and you dream the kind of dream that I just described before, this was an unbelievably clever, diabolical, that's the word they use, diabolical plot to break apart and make sure that the Arabs would all come together. Now, if you ask them, but how do you know there really is such thing as Arabness? Oh, they'll kill you if you say that. But the way they see it, this was exquisitely designed, and it depends how you look at it. You could say it was a design of the European imperialists, or if you want to get better, design of the Zionists. Then it was to encourage this sort of thing to break up the Arab national. Look what a good job they did of it. So they see the whole 20th century as a Jewish plot. You understand? It's an exquisite way of really screwing over the Arab nationalist dream. Zionism, the Balfour Declaration, European Jewish immigration in a manner that excluded Arabs. That's what Zionism was. It was different than the other forms of colonialism. When the British went into Egypt, there's only a few of them, and Egyptians are all over the place. So the British, what's the right word? Exploited Egyptian labor and stuff, to build a good lifestyle for themselves. But the country was still Egyptian. French did the same thing in Syria, and Italians in Libya, and so on and so forth. French in Morocco, it was all Moroccans, a couple of Frenchmen at the top, and they exploited the Moroccan thing for the benefit of Morocco. The Jews took us to another madrega. The Jews come in, they didn't exploit the Arab labor, they excluded. Tel Aviv is an all-Jewish city, no Arabs. Thank you very much. The kibbutz, which the Zionists raised as a model, is to them racism. Not an Arab is allowed on the kibbutz. Now the Jews will say, can't do it. It'll be like today, literally today. They'll knife you. The Arabs don't want to hear the other side. So what they say is like this: no, you created a parallel civilization in 1920s and 30s. Separate schools, no Arabs. Separate unions, no Arabs. Separate cities, no Arabs. The Jews keep saying this: we have to. The Arabs will shach us, so we don't do it. No. That's not important. What's important is doing separate ones, and there's racism, and so on and so forth. It seemed a fiendish and clever way of not only preventing the Arabs from gaining their own national liberation in Palestine, but actually a way of removing them from Arab land, from displacing them. That's something that the British and the French and the others didn't do. They didn't kick them off the land. But the Jews are buying karka, as we know, it's called the JNF. And when they do that, they kick the Arabs out. They put a Jewish kibbutz or form like that. And the Arabs said, this is a fiendish and clever way of displacing us. The only other colonialists to do that were whom? Americans. That's right, the Americans. Okay? Who really shafted over the Indians. So here's to the Arab nationalists, this is the model of the Zionists. Understand? I'm serious, yeah? Kicked all the Cherokee out. Used to be, you know what I'm talking about, right? I assume everybody knows what I'm talking about. Used to be Indians all over the place. Right or wrong, Andrew Jackson became president, he forced them all out, they died on the way, too bad, and so on and so forth. So that's the Jews. That's the Zionists. So I'm trying to show you how an entire culture, an entire way of thinking, which eventually is spread throughout literature, movies, eventually becomes part of the basic things you learn in junior high and high school, and certainly in college, down till today, or until very recently. This view is not one that you and I learned, let's say, in TA or something like that, right? But nevertheless, this is how a lot of the world sees it, or in their part. So in other words, to them, Zionism was a form of colonialism designed to frustrate Arab nationalism. You hear what I said? It was designed to frustrate Arab nationalism. It was totally negative and genuinely diabolical. Now here's the thing, and this is what's infuriating to a Jew, or perhaps to a third party. In order to make that argument, the Arab nationalists had to totally dismiss any Jewish claims whatsoever to Israel. Because the Jews will say like this: you have Arab nationalism, fine. We have a Jewish nationalism. And the Arabs will say then, and they'll say today, there is no such thing as Jewish nationalism. But we tell you the Jews have been a people for thousands of years. It's a lie. It's not true. The Jews are a little religious group that it should be dhimmis like they were in the Ottoman Empire. No, but we tell you that Yerushalayim, Jews lived here long ago. Well, no, it's not true. It's not true. You know, how can you tell me it's not true? Just the same way you demand that someone should respect your subjective reality, why can't I demand that you should respect mine? No, that's different. What I just pointed to is the big lie, right, in the Arab nationalism. That, in other words, their assertion is based on the fact that they have to counter-assert that the Jewish thing. If you agree with what I said, that the whole Jewish thing is a fake, then Zionism is one big diabolical plot to break up the Arabs. That's the reason it was created. That's the reason it's implemented. Obviously, it has no legitimacy, and one day will be gone because it has no other reason. But the Jews say like this: no, we have our thing. We're not against your nationalism. Starting from Herzl on, the Jews say like this: let's share, let's talk, let's do this, that, and the other. No, you have nothing to say. You understand? Nothing to say. They had to deny the Jewish past. They had to deny any Jewish rights or any shaykhs to Eretz Yisrael. None. The fact that the Jews viewed their past as connected to Israel was denied and derided, and of course it still is. Perhaps many of you saw this the other day. Hanan Zwebi in the Israeli parliament, and what does the headline say? The Temple Mount should be Jew-free. There is no scientific proof of a Jewish temple to site, and accused of Israel trying to occupy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I mean, I know you follow the news in the paper, I get it. And the Jews like this: we were out there too. No, you're not. But what about King Solomon? It's a lie. In other words, in order to make their... What's that? She's a member of the parliament. I know that. I know. I'm simple. Listen, I could show you Arafat, but he's dead. This one's alive, unfortunately. You know, so she's still... They're talking right now in the news. No, but look what it says. The name is Al-Aqsa. It's not the Temple Mount. There is nothing here for Jews, she told the Israeli paper. It's a place for Muslim only, according to all the agreements, blah, blah, blah. The Jews have no shaykhs whatsoever. She said, if you want to dream and stand on the other side of the wall, that's your business. You want to come in there, it's not yours at all. So here you have the Makama Turfa, the weak point, with a bunch of liars, and the whole Arab nationalist position, which is all based on saying, I demand that you respect my thing, but I'm not willing to give you any respect to yours. Okay? And the same person who's going to be a Muslim who says, how do you know, why is Jerusalem, listen to this, Why is the temple a holy site of Islam? Muhammad flew on the horse there up to heaven, which is a dream, and they say. So Jews are like this. Where's the proof of that? No, you can't deny that. Right? That's a fact. But that King Solomon had a thing there. So I said, where's the historic proof that Muhammad flew up to heaven on the thing? No, that doesn't count. You get what I'm saying? There's this what's the right word? Bifurcation, Palgina de Bordico. You know, what I say is okay, what you say is not okay, and all the rest of it. This shows you that if anybody had any conscience pangs 10 minutes ago when I'm laying at the Arab position, now you see that they're full of baloney. Because it's all based on making like, it's my house, it's not your house, and you never owned it, and I'll deny that totally. So in other words, the Arab nationalists, to whom patronizing colonialism is the worst sin, were themselves guilty of colonial condescension and dismissal of Jewish claims, and of the Jews' own self-definition. I'll tell you again, I just found I didn't do much work for this talk. He says, here's an easy line from the Temple Mount. But if you read the Arab culture and literature, the Jews are not a nation. Wait a minute, the Jews feel that they're a nation. No, they're not. But they say they do. It's not true. But they say they do. It's not true. That's why they live in the Torah Karta. Right? Now, the Torah Karta actually does believe in a Jewish nation, but not the Zionist one. That's good enough. You understand? That's good enough. But all these Jews live in, and now Israel's an established reality. 6 million Jews live. It doesn't matter. So it's not true. But we feel that we have a country and we have that. It doesn't mean anything. So that's a powerfully dismissive kind of attitude, which delegitimates your own position as far as I'm concerned, but not as far as they're concerned, because they're a bunch of liars. I'll say it again, they're a bunch of liars, which is why this movement collapsed over the course of a century. They're actually a lot worse than liars, but I'm in a synagogue. Now, as a result of World War II, and then the Cold War, France and Britain couldn't hold on to their control of the Arab countries. One by one, all the Arab countries became fully independent. The cost of holding on was politically and economically too high. So here are the famous people associated: Attlee, Merrill Macmillan, Charles de Gaulle. Little by little, they got out of Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Egypt and Morocco and Algeria and all that sort of thing. Okay? So that means that by the time you get around the time of Israel in the 50s and the 60s, when we're up to, Arab nationalism could feel triumphant. Sort of. But the lack of unity could not be eliminated, because they couldn't get around the fact that the Arabs are not one country. There's Iraq, there's Syria, they hate each other, they fight each other, they compete with each other. By the way, at the public level, they had the Arab League, and whenever the meetings, they all kiss each other, but everybody knew it's baloney, you see? The lack of unity could not be eliminated. Each new state jealously held on to its own self-interest, which is what states do. Okay? That's what states do. So Egypt was out to get this one, Libya's out to get this one, and so on and so forth. This was all very frustrating to Arab nationalists, because the Messianic era didn't turn out the way they planned. The fact that now, in addition to the fundamental lack of unity and the quarrels and the wars between the different Arab states, the fact that Israel became a state in 1948 in the midst of the Arab nationalist struggle is actually providential. It's min hashamayim. And the reason I say this is because the Arabs did not get as worked up over the establishment of Israel as one might have expected, because the Arabs at that moment were more focused on their own independence struggles, which were not over. Okay? I'll show you a clip in a second from Rabbi Goren. It's in Hebrew, but I'll tell you what it means out loud very briefly, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Nasser, who I'm going to talk about later, comes the apotheosis of Arab nationalism. In 1948, Nasser was in the Egyptian army. He fought the Israelis in the Gaza area, Fallujah, and all that sort of thing. At that time, he was against the war with Israel, if you know his biography. He said, first we got to work on kicking the British out of Egypt, then work about Israel. And he didn't put full kayak into the war against here. And actually, when he met with Israelis in the truce negotiations, Yerucham Cohen and others, so you'll see in a moment, he actually said like this: I admired the Israelis. Man Nasser. He said, I admired the Israelis. Tell me how you kicked the British out. We have a lot to learn from you. You get it? Now, it so happens that he was a major, and Rabbi Goren, at that time, was just become the army rabbi in Israel, 48, 49, and there were a bunch of Jews who died, and they were in a cemetery on the other side of the line. And part of the armistice agreements was that each one could come and take kavarim graves from the other one, or Goren, we'll see in a second, went behind the Egyptian lines to the Jewish cemetery and said some prayer for them. Nasser was the driver, right? Nasser was the driver, and Goren said like this, why are you driving like this? He says, all the Arabs are zigzag. None of us are yasher. That's what he said. Right? He said, that's what it is. Meaning, it wasn't the conversation I just related to you could not be imagined with a Hamas person from today. It could not be imagined with an ISIS and another person from today. Because at that particular moment, the Arab world said, Israel's terrible. And the fact that they kicked the Palestinians out is terrible. But what are we doing about the French? What are we doing about the Italians? What are we doing about the British? This was Min Hashamayim. Because if they would put all their efforts, all their efforts, in 48, Israel was weak at that time. There would have been a tough business. You understand? Take a look at this.
אנחנו נבקש את הקול הבא להיכנס לכאן, בבקשה, הוא מורכב משני אנשים.
This is, in Israel, this is your life. I'm serious. That was his driver.
ונכנס אדם נוסף שאיתו עברת את הקווים.
He's the one who was talking with Nasser, Yerucham Cohen.
היסטוריה משותפת ירוחם. הודות לו, זכיתי להתפלל על קברותיהם של 81 מן הקדושים שלנו בפלוג'ה.
I was able to pray at the grave. Nasser.
היה הנהג שלי, הכניס אותי לתוך הכיס.
Nasser was my driver.
הוא העמיד משמר כבוד.
They gave him a guard of honor.
בזמן שהתפללתי על קברותיהם. שאלתי אותו בדרך, מה אתה נושא זיגזגים? אתה לא יודע את הסיפור הזה. אז הוא אומר, this is our mentality, not to go straight. כך הוא אמר. אז אני רואה שהוא באמת היה עקבי מאוד, not to go straight, אלא ללכת בזיגזגים, אבל לא הצליח בהליכה.
This is 1972. So the point is that this is what they were... Yeah, you know, but even if 50% is true. By the way, but this part is true because he did go in the other thing, and Nasser was the driver. That's a fact. Now, from 48 to 62, let's jump up to our time. From 1948 to 62, Arab nationalism took comfort in the liberation of one state after another, culminating in Algeria, meaning one after another, 48, 49, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, and so forth. Eventually, Egypt got themselves out of the control of the British. Eventually, the Iraqis got themselves out of control. They had a violent revolution in 58, completely out of control of the British. Morocco got out of the French. Tunisia. The last holdout was Algeria, where the French fought very hard. But by 62, de Gaulle, the French pulled out. And that was the final triumph of the Arab nationalism, that they kicked out all the European invaders from all the area of the Middle East, except, of course, one. Israel. Now, the corrupt regime, the problem is like this. So from the theory of nationalism, as I told you before, it's a made-up concept. And so like all made-up theories, it promises a Gan Eden at the end, a paradise. If all the Italians would get together and throw out the Austrians and the others, Italy would be a paradise. Well, guess what? It was not a paradise. It's better that they got rid of the foreigners, but it didn't turn the country into a rich country or something like that, you know? A terrible poverty. Otherwise, all the Italians will come over here. And Germany is questionable. But for Arabia, for the Arabs, very complicated picture. Because in each and every Arab country, corrupt regimes seized power. And this is a problem for the Arab nationalists. Okay? Every single Arab country got controlled by some dictator group, either civilian or military, or a combination of both, which implemented a police state with harsh repressions. That time there was no CNN and YouTube, so it was a happy hunting ground for dictator regimes. Just pull somebody off the street or burn down towns or things like that. And they got away with it. You understand? They got away with it. And leaders like these fat cat oil sheiks or these uneducated and unidealistic army officers were a real turnoff to thoughtful Arab intellectuals. I mean, this is the best we can come up with. Like I said before, some ruthless army guy just killed everybody and took over. Saddam Hussein type of something. This is the best we can come up with. We have educated people. We have universities. We have smart individuals. Why can't we do like Europe, America? You know, get some normal, peaceful, smart people over there to build the country. It never turns out like that. You understand? It never turns out because the truth of the matter is the whole Arab national was a lie. Now, hence, because of what I just said, you have the unique charisma in this era of Gamal Abdel Nasser. And the reason is because he was perceived, and I say this is correct, but I'm talking about what they saw, perceived as being the exception to everything I just said. I mentioned this last year. He was seen as not corrupt, as being idealistic, as standing up for the little guy, of trying to advance the rest of society. Now, a lot of this was a lie, as you'll see in a second, but some of it wasn't. And the fact that what I just said is about 25% true was amazing to the Arab nationalists, even if the other 75% was not true. That's where it's holding. You see? The crowds you see in the next video are real crowds. They're not rent-a crowds. You understand? What you can get in the Middle East or anywhere. They're real crowds. No, this was genuine enthusiasm. Okay? And when he spoke, especially in the early years, especially in the 50s, he came to power in 52, 53, 54, he really had the crowds on him. When he had the thing in the streets, I'll say it again, this was genuine feeling over there, at least in the beginning. And Nasser was perceived as the personification, if not the apotheosis of Arab nationalism. As I said before, part of his program, he wrote a book, or a friend of his wrote a book under his name, ghostwriting, which is called, I think, Philosophy of the Revolution, I think it's called, in which he says Egypt is the center of Africa, Egypt is the center of the Arab world, and Egypt is also the center of the third world. Whoa, these are big claims. And people saw this like, this is Gavaldic. And one of the pieces is that Nasser wanted to unite all the Arab countries, of course, under him. But nevertheless, people say, I guess, what, the Sheikh in Saudi Arabia is better? Saddam Hussein type, whoever was in Iraq, is better? Let it be on to Nasser. We're sure that he needs the best for everybody. And then you'll finally start to get at the problems of poverty and illiteracy and terrible economic conditions and all the other junk that has characterized the Arab world. This is what they wanted. They wanted to believe in him whether it was true or not. They wanted to believe that there existed an idealistic Arab ruler who viewed the Arabs as a reality. Now again, subjectively, they speak Arabic. So all the people from Morocco to Iraq, is all a reality. They wanted someone who could bring about the subjective popular will to subscribe to this theory that would make it a reality. And he has the charisma. The Americans tried to bribe him with something, use the money to build a gigantic radio station, and then his speeches could go all over the Arab world. He was a very good speaker in Arabic. And he touched a chord with them, and people really were worked up. The problem is, as I told you before about Arab nationalism in general, was it true? Right? Don't ask that question. Was it true? Take a look at this very interesting little audio-visual piece I would call Expectations of Nasser.
Nasser came to revolutionary leadership through military service. The son of a postal worker, he had joined in demonstrations as a schoolboy. In the army, his seriously intense personality showed he had marked qualities of leadership. He was only 34 when he came to power, but he quickly became the wildly acclaimed hero of his fellow countrymen. Leaders great and small sought him out, all no doubt with their own interests in mind, for such is the nature of international power politics. And Nasser created for his own people a spectacle of power which resembled the dreams of all dictators.
Nasser was the first true Egyptian to hold true power in Egypt for more than 2,000 years. One of his major ambitions was to reawaken a sense of Egyptian consciousness, identity, to revive a sense of pride and self-respect. When I first met Gamal Abdel Nasser, I was greatly impressed by his quiet charm, his dignity, and his commanding presence. But the most impressive thing was the reaction of the Egyptians in the room. There was a great buildup of tension and expectation, as though some godlike figure were about to arrive on the scene. The Egyptians had turned Nasser into a sort of new pharaoh. They saw in him qualities that he did not have, and they expected from him deeds that he would be unable to perform.
There hasn't been an Arab, a native Egyptian ruling Egypt all during the Muslim times, and before that when it was part of the Roman Empire, and before that it was part of the Greek Empire. And you got to go back to the biblical times, right? and in other countries too. And if you look at it from the point of view of Arab nationalists, this is the first Arab in 1,500 years, or thereabouts, since the 600s, the 700s, who was an Arab leading the Arabs. And it turned out that he looked like a nice guy, in their opinion, and young, dynamic, and all that kind of stuff, is a Mashiach. And the problem, of course, is he wasn't. Now, during the years 52 to 60, thereabouts, Nasser's star was on the up, on the ascendant. He was seeing as moving to unite the Arab world in some fashion. How exactly was not clear, but this was his goal. His powerful radio carried his speeches all over the Arab world. So what I want to get across to you, this will seem funny, is to the Arabs, when they listen to him on the radio, it's like listening to Winston Churchill. You understand? To us, in the Blitz or something like that. They didn't see as a bad guy. He saw him as a gewaldiger guy, and such a great speaker, and inspirational. His speeches, the phrases ring and the rafters sing, all that sort of thing. That he struck a powerful chord in the Middle East is evidenced by the pictures of him all over the shuks in the Middle East. Many travelers in the 50s and 60s, including Nixon, I might say, writes about this. He says, I went to a bazaar in Damascus, another place in Morocco, and another place in Algeria, and here and there and the other, and I went to the shuk, like Machne Yehuda type thing that we're familiar with, the Arab version. Everywhere I saw photos of Nasser. It wasn't his country even. So you see that they listened to radio, and whoever their local guys, they saw some jerk, and Nasser is the man. And they built this whole thing up. It's even more powerful by the United Arab Republic. If you remember last year, I told you that Syria, on its own, isn't it remarkable? In 1958, I think, 59, went to Nasser and says, take us over and unite Syria and Egypt into one country, which gave Ben Gurion a heart attack, And they did do it. Nasser did go there. Now, he screwed it up. He put Egyptians in there. He didn't act the right way. Therefore, the Syrians eventually said, we don't want this. They broke away. But the very fact that a country is willing to totally surrender its national identity to a leader of another country means they didn't view him simply as a leader of another country, at the beginning anyway. But they say, you're the leader of all the Arabs. And therefore it's called the United Arab Republic, which they eventually thought will be like the United States, that all the different Arab countries will be states of one big republic, and then we'll get rich and powerful like America. Especially we can add that oil into there, right? And so this was the problem. Failure of the United Arab Republic, because they said after a few years it fell apart, reflects the fact that despite the high hopes placed in him, despite the very powerful rhetoric, Nasser was full baloney. Take a look at this.
Nasser was a gifted leader in appearance and in behavior, and also because of his quiet way, he inspired trust in people. People genuinely believed that he had integrity and that he had a desire to build a new country, to reform, to purge the old. They did trust him. But after a few experiences, many began to discover that their trust was misplaced. People who had frequent contact with Nasser began to describe him as a talented liar.
Now, by 1962, when I'm starting this year, after the triumph of Algeria, which is partly due, not in a small part, to Nasser's inspiration and inspiring the Algerian rebels and all that, Nasser had to face now the rubber hit the road. Now by 62 and afterwards, even though I said Ben Gurion was having conniptions, but and the Israelis thought he's going to pull it off. He doesn't know what we know, because now it's all over. You look back in hindsight. By that time, he looked like unstoppable. But in reality, after 62, Nasser had to face the fact that his socialist policies turned Egypt into a permanent economic basket case. Egypt, prior to Nasser, was run by King Farouk and that whole gang. And these were basically foreigners who were not Egyptian, who very cleverly in the 19th century got a hold of the Egyptian economy, which is potentially a big moneymaker. Consider all those peasants working for nothing. And Egypt has the Nile River, of course, and cotton endlessly, and other resources there. It always has been. The fate of Egypt has always been to be the supplier of food and raw materials for the Roman Empire, for other countries as well. So if you can get a hold of that, you can become very rich. The people don't get anything, but you become very rich. So by the time the Egyptian Revolution happened in 1952, the whole Egypt was owned by a few people. There was actually a few Jews also that owned a bunch of department stores that were zillionaires or whatever. If you read the new Avad Yosef biographies, you can see he had a lot of trouble with them when he was rabbi there in Cairo in 48 or something, 49. This is what Egypt was. Nasser came in as a member of the lower class. His father was, I think, a postal clerk. And he genuinely wanted, and he accomplished, to kick out two groups. These foreigners who were controlling the economy and capitalists in general. So notice he bought into the idea that capitalism is something evil. It's always been used to oppress the Egyptians. Now he made the mistake of saying what we want to do is state socialism. Because it sounded great. And he wasn't very educated in economics. As the result is that Nasser did things that all the Egyptians like. He nationalized the Suez Canal. He also nationalized all the department stores and the companies and things like this. You get it? Well, the Egyptian could then say like this. For the first time in thousands of years, Egyptians control the companies and the businesses in Egypt. I get that. I get that. Now, what's the downside? If the government controls it, we know in America and elsewhere, it ain't going anywhere. You understand? Become corrupt, inefficient, and all the rest of it. And that's what happened in Egypt. And he set it on a disaster course. Thank God. He set it on a disaster course. When you marry together this incorrect set of economic policies with a dramatically rising population, that's the recipe for disaster. Because one of the things that happens in all the Arab countries is baby boom. The Nasser government, like the other Arab governments, doesn't see it smart to have a birth control policy. Although by the late 60s, you won't believe this, they realized it. I read once years ago, it really was interesting to me. Nasser had a private conversation of all people with Gore Vidal, who of course hates Israel. Right? Hates Israel. And Nasser and Muhammad Hassan and Haikal, they said like this: we've been looking over, like Chaim Pumpernickel, we've been looking for a pasuk in the Quran that can justify the birth control, because this is our number one problem. Because the money wasn't there, the economy was crashing, and there are more kids coming out every year. And in order to make in order to make sure that there won't be a revolution, Nasser had to do the following. Now listen closely. Who makes revolutions? Educated people. So an uneducated person can't read and write throughout history. They're the cannon fodder of the revolutionaries. They're the dummies that do the work. But the Lenins and the Trotsky and other people have education. So on the other hand, you can't have a modern country without mass education. One of the things Nasser did was free college, free high school, which is a big deal. I'm not knocking it. That's a big deal. But then you have a tarta desastre, a contradiction. You're graduating zillions of men and women with college education and no jobs. That's revolutionaryism. Nasser wasn't stupid. So what he said from day one is like this: anybody that graduates in the government, worst comes to worst, you work for Social Security. You understand? Worst comes to worst, you work for the government. We will get you a job. So you found offices with 20, 30, 40, 50 employees where you need one or two. So you know what that's going to happen. You understand? So all this, listen, I'll say this again. This whole Min Hashamayim, if Egypt would have got its act together, Israel would be in big trouble. You know, the Israelis didn't know this was happening at the time. In hindsight, the good Lord, but so the dream of Arab nationalism is going to be a Gan Eden and a Messianic era didn't happen. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a person says like this: you can make fun of me all you want. I got a 9-to-5 job, which I didn't have before. And maybe my job is a joke, but I get a pension, and I get a vacation, and I get all the rest of it. You get what I'm saying? But you know and I know who pays the piper, and where the money comes from. So, on the one hand, his economic policies made Egypt a permanent basket case, which they are till today. This is an embarrassing reality that was not part of the Arab nationalist playbook. Second, there was the intractable problem of Israel. Theoretically, Nasser is supposed to do it like this. You get rid of the British from Egypt, which was a long struggle. Then you kick the French out of Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. That was another struggle. You kick whoever out of Libya, and so on and so forth. And then, finally, we got rid of the Europeans. We take out the main colonialist bastion, that Zionist state. Well, he was quite aware, having been busted in 56, Israel is not going to be so easy to take out. You can make speeches. You can follow everybody up. But Sufficient Zich, among himself and the generals, he knew Israel was a tough nut to crack. In fact, even Khrushchev, told him, he said those words. He said, in Israel, you got to watch out. It's a tough nut to crack. But the public is waiting. You know, you did Egypt, you did Algeria. No. You follow? So he built up, once again, expectations that he couldn't deliver. By 1962, it was clear that Nasser was going to be strong enough to wipe out Israel. You hear what I said? By 62, Nasser realized, as did many, with Egypt's bad economy and bad this and bad that, and the army wasn't in great shape, that they're not going to be strong enough to take out Israel, which is something he tried to cover up with rhetoric. You understand? This was his way. Thirdly, his alliance with Russia meant, because that's what he chose to do, go with the USSR, meant alienation from rich America. And my friends, Russia can give you borscht. America can give you cash. Understand? Only America could bail him out of his structural economic difficulties. And by the way, that's what Sadat did in the end. And I'm sure many of you know this. One of the only reasons that there was a peace treaty signed with Israel and kept up until today is because every year Uncle Sam sends them $4 or $5 billion. And they simply can't exist without that. If anybody cuts to $4 or $5 billion, it's instant riots and revolution. You get it? Egypt descends into unbelievable chaos. So if Uncle Sam didn't give him $4 or $5 billion every year, which we do, then you wouldn't have this 30-year, people, Begin, Sadat, peace process, statesmanship, all the rest of it. It's cash, not borscht. The Russians are going to give him borscht. So wait a minute. So under Nasser, he didn't play it this way. He played it his way, which was bad for Egypt. In the 60s, these were weak years for the there was peak years. America was the only country that could bail him out of his economic difficulties, and the State Department wanted to do it. But these were strong years for the Israel lobby in Congress, which blocked that. In fact, I can tell you there was one senator, that always blocked all the Egyptian money, and that was Symington from Missouri, if anybody is from Missouri. Nasser constantly thought that he could play on both sides in the Cold War against each other, but he was not successful in this. He thought he was so clever, but you know what happens? You lie to Alphonse, you lie to Gaston, after a while, it doesn't work anymore. Fourth, if Arab unity was to be actually realized, it meant that the other Arab regimes would have to be overthrown and replaced with Nasserist leaders who would lead their countries in a direction to make it like a kingdom of the United States of Nasserist Arab states. Well, they didn't want to go. Saudis said no thank you. The Jordanians and the others said no thank you. Ben-Gurion was always terrified of this scenario, that Nasser today or tomorrow or next week is going to succeed somehow or other in overthrowing Jordan, the government, and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and making one gigantic state. Ben-Gurion wrote crazy letters to Eisenhower and Kennedy, you can get them online, in which he said, America has to sign an immediate defense treaty with Israel, give us A-bomb, missiles, land the American army over here, the Arabs are signing. And Kennedy and Eisenhower telling us, cool it. It's just baloney. It's the Arab rhetoric. They always, kissing each other. Nothing's happening. Ben-Gurion wrote about, you don't know what's happening. It's terrible and all the rest of it, Kennedy at one point even said to somebody, is Ben-Gurion normal? Something like this. Yeah. No, I understand it's different when you sit in Washington than the Middle East, but I'm just trying to show you the dynamics that characterize international affairs as far as the Middle East is concerned in those years. But guess what? The other Arab leaders didn't want to go. King Hussein fought one plot after another, and the best one I always like is, did I tell you? What? No, that's much later. In fact, Israel saved him from this. At the last minute, they call up Sudan and it's like this, don't take your nose drops. He said, what are you talking about? Put it in the sink. Put it in the sink, burned right through the sink. That was very smart. Right? That would have solved nasal drip 1, 2, 3. Oh boy. Okay, so they didn't want to go. Now Nasser, therefore, in the 60s, particularly in the period I'm talking about, 62 to 66, led a rhetorically violent attack on all these Arab rulers, specifically the kings. And his famous slogan at that time in Arabic was, the enemy of Arab nationalism is Arab reaction. Which means the reactionaries. Reactionaries like people like King Saud of Arabia and all this, who are fat cat, oil zillionaires, whose mind is back in the 3rd century, whose morals are back in the 3rd century BCE. And no, I want to tell you something. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. It was understand what I'm saying. He had this powerful radio, and it went everywhere, and everybody listened, whether they were allowed to or not. It's like Churchill. They listened. All during the 62 to 66, Nasser kept saying, because the Arabs in Arabia said, he's an Apokyrus, all the rest of it. And Nasser gets, Arabia? Saudi Arabia's a joke. You have slavery in 1960s. why don't you get rid of slavery? Aren't you ashamed to have slavery? They weren't ashamed to have slavery. They said, like that. He forced them to abolish slavery. Now, it's a lie, but at least they passed a law. Okay? So, and because he's coming out of Arab nationalist progressivism. Now, if you follow the news, or better yet, go on Wikipedia and go to this article, Human Trafficking in Saudi Arabia, which is a politically correct article for saying slavery in Saudi Arabia, you'll find that there's 100% slavery going on now. And you don't see any of the BDS groups or the others ever saying, it's human, I'll say it again, human slavery in this day and age. But how come all these students and the others don't get worked up about that? They'll say, I only have time to devote myself to one cause at a time. You understand? I don't see any African American leaders doing this either. If there was a Frederick Douglass alive today, you'd see a crusade against slavery in the Middle East. But we don't have it. All we have is Al Sharpton. It's a different thing. No, I'm serious. It's a terrible business. Go on, if you care to, go online and look this sort of thing up. In the United States of America, there are a bunch of cases in federal courts, state courts, where the Saudi Arabians come over with Dred Scott. They come over with an Indonesian maid or an African maid or something like this, and the guy rapes her and this and that and the other. And the cases we know about, the one where the police intervene and then goes in front of court, and the State Department yanks the case. And the people are escorted by the State Department out of the country. And I kid you not. Like I say, look it up yourself if you care to. Okay? And the first person to call attention is Nasser, in the context of the inter-Arab wars, because he wants Saudi Arabia to be overthrown and replaced with what he regards as Nasserist progressives. In the context of the Cold War, Uncle Sam saw this as communists, so therefore they want to help. You understand? And Israel saw this as terrible, because then Nasser will have a southern flank against Israel as well. This is the nature of the inter-Arab dynamics in the last years of Ben Gurion. So Arab politics was toxic, Baruch Hashem, in the year 1962 to 66. Will it help Israel? That's something we'll see in a moment. One last point. Arab nationalism was condescending to militant Islam. After all, it was founded by secular Muslims and Christians. The whole dynamic is a secular one. Today, the Americans long for what I'm describing. You get it? Nasser and the Muslim Brotherhood hate each other. In fact, the two historic leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood was Hassan al-Banna and Said al-Qutb. And King Farouk killed Hassan al-Banna, and Nasser killed Said Qutb. He hanged him in 1966. Okay? We'll see a reference to that later on. So, I'll tell you again, hindsight is really amazing. At that time, Israel, for propaganda, others, they say, Nasser regime is terrible. Have concentration camps, which is true. They're murdering people, which is true. They're bumping off this, that, and the other. All that is true. But from our point of view today, this is good. All the people that were killed by the Muslim Brotherhood. You understand? So you say, the due process, all the rest. What due process? If they take over, they'll shecht you? This is the reality. Little by little, the political realities of the Middle East are burning out. It takes time for many people. I understand. People are what they are. It takes time. They're burning out the mythology, the liberal mythology, which worked in America, doesn't work in that part of the world. It's pretty remarkable. Nasser's maintained a continuing struggle against Muslim Brotherhood penetration of the army and secret police. Because they would go to somebody in the army and secret police and say, really, your cousin is here and he's a from Muslim, and what are you doing this for, and join us, and infiltrate the army and be our source of information, help us, all the rest of it. And the Mukhabarat, as they called it, the Nasser's torturing secret police, had to fight against that. These are the real fights that were going on in Egypt in the Nasser period. Public didn't know. Time magazine didn't know about all this sort of thing. By the way, this is relevant today. Sisi, right, hanged him, or wants to, just like Nasser hanged Said Qutb. You know that. He condemned to death. And he wants to return to Nasser. I mean, that's exactly what he wants. That is exactly what he wants to do. He wants to bring back an Egyptian nationalism, a main fight against the Muslim Brotherhood, and penetration, because he wants to preserve his regime. Otherwise, he knows the minute he lets his guard down, they'll shecht him and his wife and whole family. And before they shecht him, they'll barbecue him. You know, this is how they do business over here, whether you like it or not. You got to get used to it. One of Nasser's greatest assets was the fact that the foremost Arab journalist was his best friend and really believed in him, was cooperative. That's Muhammad Hassan al-Haikal, who was the editor of Al-Haram, Maybe you've heard of it. You can see it online if you care to. You might want to throw up, but nevertheless, it's there. And he was a very good, in Arabic, a very good journalist from that point of view. And he genuinely believed in Nasser, and therefore you get all this Arab press stuff coming out all the time. High class, well-educated Arabs who are all pushing Nasserism. During the 50s and 60s, Arab nationalism seemed like a tidal wave that would sooner or later sweep all before it, including Israel. The interesting thing is, the Arab narrative, the Arab point of view, and this is the main point now I get to when I want to talk about tonight. The Arab narrative, the Arab point of view, in the 60s got no traction in Israel. Unlike today, when such a large portion of Israel's leadership accepts the Arab narrative to one degree or another. Herzog is, he's nuts. He wants to take the Syrians into Israel. You know that. You read in the paper, right? He says they should take the Syrian refugees into Israel. I couldn't make it up. I could, but I'm not. He says, and Omer and Livni, they want to give away the whole store. It's not politically correct to say so, but it's the truth. Once in a while, once a year you can say the truth, right? And the reason is, I hate to say this, they've accepted the Palestinian narrative, they accepted the Arab narrative, although the Palestinians won't accept ours, not a bit. And this idea of you get to fight with two hands and I get to fight with both hands, they're okay with that. They consider it as statesmanship, but they're praised by the Western press, all the rest of it. None of that happened in the 60s, okay? This was not the bougie Herzog era, it was the Ben-Gurion era. Okay? This was the image of Ben-Gurion in the 60s, right? Or the Sherman tank. He did this picture on purpose. You understand? He's sending a message. And the message is like this. He says, this is Jewish land at the help of the Arabs. That's what it means. That's exactly it. You can like it, you can not like it. You can say this is the right attitude, the wrong attitude. He didn't care, and the country went along with him at that time. This was the Ben-Gurion era. This was a picture they had at that time. This is a Jewish country, and let me tell you something. If the Arabs make total claims which deny us, we make total claims deny them. They don't like it, they can jump in a lake. You want to push me in the sea? Try it. That's what it is. The early 60s were the ripe years of Ben-Gurionist Israel, where the dominant narrative was staunchly Jewish nationalist, period. Ben-Gurion controlled the radio. At that time, there wasn't independent, like BBC, it wasn't independent Israeli radio where you can have journalists and others who attack Israel, all the time, as they do, and criticize the country. It was controlled by my pie party. Thank you very much. So he gets propaganda. Most of the newspapers, except Haaretz, were staunchly nationalist. The Mapai, the Mapam, the Chairut, and the what do you call that? The Mizrahi, all the way. Oh boy, there's no time for the Arab narrative whatsoever. This is a period, Eretz Yisrael, Hashlima, Shalanu, period. Okay? The Mapai controlled the education. That means from kindergarten to university, you get the Israeli narrative. We didn't kick the Arabs out in 48. They all ran away. The Mufti told them to. You understand? We want them to stay. You understand? And all the land, and this has all been part of Jewish land forever. The Arabs stumbled into here by accident. You get it? No, I'll say it again. So there wasn't left-wing professors with any kind of traction during this period. There wasn't textbooks. There weren't seminars and things like this in which the Jewish narrative was called into critical question. But it was accepted unquestionably. I'm speaking now of the culture of Ben-Gurion is Israel, and this is what it was once upon a time. The principal parliamentary opposition was not from the left, it was from the right. The leader of the opposition was Menachem Begin. Well, that means Ben-Gurion didn't get any pressure to liberalize, he got pressure the other way. Why don't you take back the Shtachim? Why don't you take back to conquer Yerushalayim? As a matter of fact, in those days, Begin said like this, we want Jordan back. Okay? The Arabs in Israel kept under martial law and out of sight. We've talked about this in the past. Ben-Gurion, even though public opinion was changing a little bit, he insisted until he fell from power that the military regime, as they call it, the martial law should remain in place. He said you can't trust the Arabs a bit. They have to remain confined to Nazareth. So that means if you lived in Tel Aviv, you didn't see any Arabs. If you lived in Haifa, you saw very few. If you lived in Yerushalayim, again, hardly any. It's not like today. You understand? And therefore, we may have trouble from, to guard the borders. No stabbing in a mall in Tel Aviv. You get it? This is exactly how Ben-Gurion thought. So he says, you can give me all the liberal stuff you want, all the rest of it. I'm not going to have it that somebody is walking in Beersheba has to be worried about some Arab coming up and stabbing him. There aren't any Arabs in Beersheba. You see? This was the attitude in those days. The Arab Knesset members were stooges of the Mapai in those years. There wasn't any Arab Knesset members. The Mapai had something called the Arab Party, and they got a sheik here and a thing here and this one and that one, and they basically were stooges, okay, of the Mapai. The Zionist self-perception is reflected in the fact that what do they call what was going on in Israel? Geula. They've been goel the land, redeeming the land. So they're assigning religious and messianic importance, and if it's religious and messianic, it cannot be questioned. Everything we do is legitimate. And so, this is what I mean in the title when I said it was a triumphant Arab nationalism, yes. It was also, to meet it, a triumphant Jewish nationalism, which said, I don't care what you say. And the Aliyah was still impressive in those years. Look at the figures. 61, almost 50,000, 60,000 in 62, 65,000 in 63, 55,000 in 64, 31,000. I mean, those are large numbers. Would you agree? So mostly from Morocco, in those years, Romania. But whatever the case is, Zionism was working, so to speak. You understand? Every year the country was building up. Now, yes, they still were messing over the Sephardim and all the things I talked about in the past. All this was true and development. But nevertheless, Ben-Gurion said like this, I don't know, it will take too long. I can show you a speech he made from there. We're building up the country and adding Hit Yashvut and this and that and the other industry and so on and so forth. The Sephardim were continually shifted, but the future looked better. Okay? Ben-Gurion could say, today we have trouble, but tomorrow, remember he used this, I think it's the Ramat Kalabi Atemani. Okay? Tomorrow things will get better. Ben-Gurion promised in those years a Negev paradise. Is anybody old enough to remember this? Long ago, in Negev they're building up, it's going to make a Garden of Eden, and the whole thing's going to be covered with grass from one end to the other. It's not exactly what happened, but people believed it. You understand? And they thought this is the future, and maybe if they put money into it, I don't know. Thus, in general, there's exceptions to what I'm saying, but in general, Israelis looked at themselves as living in a historic moment of Jewish history. They did not attempt to locate their narrative in relation to the Arab narrative. They simply ignored the Arab narrative, which was a healthy thing. Because as I said before, I'm maybe willing to have a dialogue with you if I acknowledge your thing and you acknowledge mine. But I'm not interested, myself, I'm not interested in doing what Herzog, for example, interested, which is you can have a Palestinian dialogue, but you don't acknowledge the Jewish one. I don't call that a dialogue. And that was the attitude in Israel at that time. So basically the Arabs are hopeless, and nothing to talk about, and the heck with them. Now, the Arabs, by contrast, could not construct a narrative except in opposition to the Jewish one. This is very fascinating. If you're an Arab nationalist, a basic component of Arab nationalism, especially after 1962 and the fall of Algeria, is Arab nationalism is a group, an idea that was put together by the Arabs, but the evil Jews have been frustrating us from day one. Otherwise, an Arab said like this: if you have Arab nationalism, so where's the Arab country? Oh, in order to understand that, the Jews, the Zionists, the Jews, the Zionists. Even in this moment, they control America, Eisenhower, Kennedy, all the rest of it. So they can't construct their own narrative except by way of reference to a diabolical Jewish narrative. But the Jews aren't like that. Ben-Gurion, he had nothing to do with the Arabs. Ben-Gurion, Israel, they said like this: we were, this was our land once upon a time, and now we're back, and we're building it up. We have neighbors who don't like us. We'll wait. You know what I'm saying? But we don't get. I don't have to explain myself. A Ben-Gurionist would say, why and what Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, all the rest of it. This is our land. You get it? I don't have to locate it within the context of Arab nationalism. As a matter of fact, the Jews are like, what Arab nationalism? You see? This is very interesting because this is very infuriating. It's very similar to the theological thing. You understand? I know many of you don't know what I'm talking about. You can't be a Christian unless you locate your Christianity in context of Judaism. You get it? To understand the New Testament is to have a certain type of relationship to the Old Testament, because that's what Christianity is. If you know Islam, it's less so, but also the same thing. You can't understand the history of the world in Islam unless you understand that there was the and then there's the Jewish people, and the Jewish people messed it up, and then eventually Muhammad picked up the ball. So the definition of Islam the core definition only exists in relation to the Jewish thing. The Jews, by contrast, don't have that attitude. What is the Jewish attitude toward Jesus? There is none. I mean, you can have an opinion. There's no formal thing like that. What about towards Muhammad? There is none. This one held this one, that one held this one. Why? We have our own thing. We were here first. You know what I mean? The Jewish narrative is relation to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, perhaps to Adam and Eve. You know, we don't have to define ourselves in relation to the other good. This really infuriates. If you have Christian friends or others, you know, they say, "What do you think about the virgin birth and about this and the Trinity?" The Jewish religion has nothing to say about it. Nothing. We don't exist. You know, it's actually very, very, very infuriating. You get what I'm saying? So maybe you shouldn't go around saying that to people. But never. But it's actually nevertheless it's true. You get it? No, the worst thing in the world is you're not even glorious to me. At least tell me of an opposite opinion, or you view Christianity differently. I'm serious. The Jews have never developed an official policy on another religion. They're all the same, right? Yeah, they're all the same. That's it. So there you have it. Now, let me bring this story to its culmination. And the Israeli media in these years pointed to Nasser's dictatorial tendencies. The Israeli media conflated Nasser with Hitler. This perception added to the clarity of the Zionist narrative. Nasser doesn't represent a point of view. He's a Hitler, right? There's Hitler with the Mufti and all that, and Nasser embraced. So, the guy's a dictator, Hitler. If he is, I have nothing to talk to you about. I know where you stand. You're just a murderer. If you adopt that point of view, we don't have to discuss or negotiate anything. You get it? And I'm not interested in your opinions. And Nasser makes 100 speeches on the radio. It's like Hitler making the speech. It doesn't mean anything. Okay? This is how they saw it. It added to the clarity, I see, of the Zionist narrative. The fact that Nasser, as we shall see, in the early 60s, had Nazi scientists working for him and ex-Nazi officers working for him in Egypt merely reinforced the Ben-Gurion message. There's nobody to talk to. The guy's a Hitler. Thus, while the Arabs looked at Nasser as a Churchill, Israel looked at him like a Hitler. So there was a complete difference in how the same phenomenon was viewed. And I'll say again that this was healthy for Israel's internal self-perception and unity. There was a left-wing opposition in Israel. There was. But it was tiny. It disagreed with the Ben-Gurion principles, but was small, weak, and marginalized. People like Martin Buber, who Ben-Gurion sitting here at Zionist Congress, and Ben-Gurion was saying, yes, Buber should speak first. He's older than me. All the rest is treated with condescension. You understand? Because he didn't get any traction out there. Buber would say, "Oh, it's I and thou, and the Arab is my brother." And people say, "Oh, it's very nice." All the rest of it. You know? No, because they'll go to the ISIS and say, "Yeah, I and thou." You understand? No, this is how they did it. And the left very often discredited itself. Here was another big proponent, Uri Avneri, right? But on the other hand, this is the only cover of his magazine that I could show you. You understand? He ran a Playboy, and so in other words, the leader of the opposition in principle to the Ben-Gurion's principles, they discredit themselves by being associated with smut. You get it? Now, thus to the intense fury of the Arabs, the sweep of Arab nationalism failed to make a dent on Israel. This colonialist bastion, as they saw, became stronger every year, thanks to Ben-Gurion's ceaseless reinforcement. That was his policy. Indeed, the early 60s saw a large aliyah, increased GNP. The Israeli economy finally started to get its act together in the early 60s. And a rise in living standards, and a significant increase in the strength of the Israeli Army and Air Force. The early 60s, you don't even know who this is, but this guy and Rabin and Asa Weizmann, they put together a powerful force. That's something I'll say for later. But the Tzahal and the Air Force significantly increased qualitatively its kayach. When they had the 67 war, the Arabs didn't know what they were up against. You understand? They weren't paying attention. Israel really built this stuff up there. And this is the opposite. Israel should have been weakening under the Arab propaganda narrative. The Jews should have been questioning their right to exist, as is the case today. There should be a powerful left-wing movement. There wasn't any. The frustration vented itself in paroxysms of rage and denigration in the Arab press and literature. But in those days, nobody outside the Middle East ever heard of that stuff. So yeah, you had, here's Nasser kicking out a Jew with a hook nose, right? You like that caricature? This kind of stuff happened all the time in the Middle East, but the Israelis just filed it away so they could use it in some argument, and the rest of the world didn't get an Arab newspaper, and it wasn't the internet. It wasn't even CNN. Now, I want to do a little fast forward. All during the early 60s, Arab nationalism said, just as we got rid of the British and French colonialists, so we'll get rid of the Jewish colonialists. It took a while, but not that long, but it happened in the end. This accomplishment was the main thing that gave legitimacy to Arab nationalism, which was a myth, as I told you. After all, the new Arab regimes didn't give their peoples a better standard of living. But then, as we know, came 1967 and 73, when the Arabs were totally defeated, followed by the Sadat-Begin Treaty, which closed off an Arab military option. At the same time, the dictatorships in the Arab world got worse and worse. From jerks, you got monsters. Okay? You know this. Now, if you're an intelligent Arab, and there are, obviously, educated, intelligent Arab, this is what the future is? You know what I mean? No, this is what we fought for? To have a one-party state in which, my brother or cousin ever gets electrocuted every Thursday? Like what is this? Okay? Instead of the oil billions fueling an Arab renaissance, and that's what should have happened, because the good Lord gave the Arabs, I don't know why, he gave the Arabs all the oil. So theoretically, listen to this. If you're an Arab nationalist, it should be like this. All the Arab states get together, then God throws them the oil, they get trillions, and then they build up a country better than America. Better health, education, welfare, right? Better jobs, better everything. They got the money for it. It's money to burn. But it doesn't turn out like that, right? Doesn't turn out like that. Instead of the oil billions fueling an Arab renaissance, it becomes the private property of selfish sheiks and princes who imitate Marie Antoinette. Now, you think I'm kidding? All I did was just go online and Google Saudi millionaires or parties or something like that. And here's one that I could show you. This is an Orthodox synagogue.
We never put money in the bank. What we get, we spend it. We get, we spend it.
Coming up, Sheikh Hamad unveils his latest project. Sheikh Hamad is a member of one of Abu Dhabi's richest families. As a royal, he has a staff of 200 at his beck and call. Having served 30 years in the military, this former royal guard now enjoys the finer things in life, like spending 6 months of the year in his idyllic desert palace. But he's always thinking of inventive ways to spend his money. His latest venture is this, possibly the world's most expensive garage.
Here, one of my first projects in the 80s. I put this Mercedes over a truck chassis.
Sheikh Hamad has over 200 vehicles, an eclectic mix of classic cars, jeeps, trucks, Hummers, sports cars, and some that defy description. Many are his customized creations. He likes these historic Dodge trucks, so he builds them in different sizes.
This one is 4 times bigger than this one in scale, but 64 times bigger in volume.
Inside, it's actually another motorhome for his desert trips. The master bedroom on the 2nd story looks out through the windscreen. There's even a kitchen and guest bedrooms.
Here we are in the balcony, big balcony. We can land a helicopter here. The most expensive car is that Rolls-Royce, the big one. Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth, when she was here in the 80s, she was in this same car. So we put the British flag there.
You know what I say? Baruch Hashem. Why? If they used the money, it would use against Israel. So now if you're an Arab nationalist, you see this, you see this. If you really care about the public and all the rest, it says, a jerk like this has it, so he says, I don't spend any, I don't put any money in the bank, I burn it. You understand? So let's put it this way. By the 1980s, Arab nationalism as a vital force was spent. Because it is. You can't make these arguments anymore. Since ideology abhors a vacuum, and since the masses find the status quo unbearable, Arab nationalism was displaced by militant Islam. Okay? That is how we got to where we are today, which is why you have this difference. Right? Say what you want, but this is how it happened. Nasserism and Westernism, the Western is hated by the Islamists. Again, I'm going to show you a piece here for 2 minutes. I said it once before. You have to pay close attention to the captions. They're not so clear in English on the top. You'll do the best. This is a speech Nasser gives in which he said, I met with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they said, I don't want to talk to you until you make your daughter wear a hijab, a tarqa. Yeah, something like that. All the rest of it. Nasser says, what are you talking about? And so on and so forth. And in his time, he could get away with dissing them. You see, the audience is all on his side. And they'll say, let them wear the burqas. You see, Egypt today, and the Middle East today, and the Muslim world today is in a very different place, as you know. So here's a real timepiece from 1960 or so.
في سنة 53 كنا نريد فعلا مخلصين ان احنا نتعاون مع الاخوان المسلمين على ان يسيروا في الطريق الصحيح والطريق السليم. وقابلت المرشد العام للاخوان المسلمين وقعد وطلب مطالب. طلب ايه؟ اول حاجة قال لي يجب ان تقيم الحجاب في مصر وتخلي كل واحدة تمشي في الشارع تلبس طرحة. كل واحدة تمشي. وأنا قلت له يعني إذا الواحد قال هذا الكلام بيقولوا رجعنا لأيام الحاكم بأمر الله اللي كان بيخلي الناس ما يمشوش بالنهار ويمشوا بالليل. أنا في رأيي إن كل واحد في بيته هو اللي ينفذ هذا الكلام. فقال لي لا أنت باعتبارك الحاكم مسؤول. قلت له يا أستاذ أنت ليك بنت في كلية الطب مش لابسة طرحة ولا حاجة. ما لبستهاش طرحة ليه؟ ده كنت أنت. إذا كنت أنت مش قادر تلبس بنت واحدة اللي هي بنتك طرحة، عايزنا ننزل ألبس 10 مليون طرح في البلد الناس.
I says, if you're unable to make one girl wear it, if you're unable to do one, how are you going to make the whole Egyptian people, right, wear all the tarqa? That's the end. My point is, this speech could not be made today. They kill him. You understand? So it's a different era in Middle Eastern history, for better or worse. As a matter of fact, take a look at the next picture. There's Nasser with his family. They're all westernized. Look at the girls. You see? They're all westernized. This is not the picture they presented at ISIS. Looks down on this. Let's close by looking at Israel. Has the Ben Gurion, this is a tough one now, has the Ben Gurion Zionist narrative survived to the present day? It's a hard question. The post-Ben Gurion left has emerged as a major force in Israel. The Labour Party since 1977 has moved sharply to the left, meaning locating the Zionist narrative within the Palestinian narrative, trying to. In general, the Ashkenazic Jews, this is my final point, have become extremely sensitized to the Arab narrative. The secular Ashkenazic Jews have become extremely sensitized to the Arab narrative, including Barak and Omer, leading them to offer everything to the Palestinians back in 2000 and 2008, only to be turned down because the Arabs haven't changed their narrative, in which the Jewish ones have no national narrative at all. Today, the Ben Gurion nationalism, to the degree it survives, They're also among three groups: the Dati, the Sephardim, the Russians. The secular Ashkenazim, up for grabs. Which way will they go? This is the central question in Israel today. People like that. And with that, I say to you, good night.